God's chosen ones. This Friday was marked in Heaven's step into your divine assignment. Chosen one, you didn't just stumble onto this message, you were summoned. There is a shift coming so real, so sacred, that even the enemy can't touch it. This Friday isn't just another day on the calendar. It's the day heaven marked with your name. And every delay, heartbreak, silence, it was never meant to destroy you. It was heaven hiding you until the gate opened. If you're one of God's chosen, then this message was written in heaven with your name on it. Introduction. They didn't tell you this part, that being chosen would feel like being forgotten. That walking with God sometimes means walking alone. That before the doors swing wide, every window in your life would seem to shut. But here you are, still breathing, still believing, even after they left. Even after the breakdowns, even after the prayers that returned in silence. You don't talk about it often, but you know what it's like to wake up with a war in your chest, to hold promises you barely remember asking for, to carry a hope so deep it aches when you speak it out loud, and still, you trust God, because something in your soul keeps whispering, there's more. Something in your spirit knows. This isn't where the story ends. You've been faithful in the wilderness. You've stood still when the storm said, run. You've stayed silent when you wanted to scream, and you've forgiven people who never once said sorry. But now, heaven is shifting. This isn't just another spiritual message, this is a summons. God didn't send you another test. He's giving you a key, a divine opening, marked in eternity, now arriving in time. This Friday, not next year, not someday. This Friday, the veil lifts. The silence breaks. The vault opens, because the heavens don't operate on clocks. They operate on alignment, and everything you thought was holding you back was actually positioning you to be launched forward. You didn't fail. You were fortified. You weren't delayed. You were developed. You weren't broken. You were built. And now the Spirit says, step forward, chosen one. This time, you don't knock. The door is already open. Part 1. The Divine Wound. Dallas, Texas. 2:17 a.m. The city sleeps, but one window glows. The hum of the refrigerator is the only sound in the room. Rachel sits at the kitchen table, arms wrapped around herself, staring at a bill she already knows she can't pay. The clock says 2:17 a.m., but her spirit feels like it's stuck somewhere between yesterday's heartbreak and tomorrow's promise. She doesn't cry loudly. She's learned how to weep without a sound, how to break open in ways no one sees. Because if you've ever been truly called, you know that sometimes your anointing will cost you your applause, and your greatest breakthroughs will begin in the quietest breakings. Rachel used to lead worship. Now she scrubs toilets in the same church that once called her anointed. She used to teach the youth about miracles. Now she can't remember the last time she saw one in her own life. But what she doesn't know is that heaven never stopped watching. That while she was wiping tears off her cheeks with Dollar Tree tissues, the angels were marking a moment, because the wound wasn't wasted. You see, the enemy doesn't fight empty vessels. He fights the ones carrying something holy. And Rachel had been carrying the next generation's revival in her belly, even when her own voice was shaking. The pain didn't mean she missed her calling. It meant she was in it. Because chosen ones aren't chosen to be comfortable, they're chosen to be consecrated. And her wound, the deep soul crack where betrayal, abandonment, and silence lived, was not the end of her story. It was the place where God began writing the next chapter with fire, not ink. Romans 8:18 rises in her spirit like a forgotten melody. The sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory. She closes her eyes. She whispers, Lord, I still believe you. And in that whisper, something breaks. Not in her, around her. Heaven shifts, earth shudders. And somewhere in the spirit, a gate begins to unlock. Because Rachel, the weary, wounded woman in a tiny Dallas apartment, just passed a test she didn't even know she was taking. She didn't curse God. She trusted him even with a cracked voice and a near-empty soul. And that trust was the key. Part 2. The Silent Season. Chattanooga, Tennessee. A cold Sunday morning. Empty downtown streets whisper with fog. The city is still dressed in gray. Downtown Chattanooga feels like a ghost town. Not because of vacancy, but because Darius's spirit can't feel anything anymore. He walks with no purpose, hands in his pockets, hood over his head. The world around him is quiet, but not in a peaceful way, in a God where are you kind of way. He's prayed, fasted, tried all the faith formulas he grew up with, but heaven has felt locked for months. He once built a 6-figure business from nothing, tithing faithfully, employing others, mentoring young men from broken homes. But then came the betrayal. A partner, a friend, a brother in Christ, the one who sat at his dinner table and then stabbed him with contracts. Now it's all gone. The money, the reputation, the trust, and worst of all, the voice of God has gone quiet. Darius stops at a broken fountain, sits and exhales like his lungs are tired of hoping. He whispers, "Why won't you talk to me?" But nothing replies. No wind, no verse, no still small voice. Just fog, just the echo of unanswered prayers. He pulls out his Bible anyway, not out of habit, out of hunger. Flipping through pages his hands have memorized, but his heart can't feel anymore. He lands on Jeremiah 29:11. "For I know the plans I have for you." And he laughs, not because it's funny, but because it hurts. I used to believe that, he mutters. Now, I don't even know if I'm still in the plan. But that's when something happens. Not outside, not in the sky, but deep inside, something ancient shifts. Not loudly, but like a compass realigning in the soul. Because what Darius doesn't know is that silence is not absence. Silence is strategy. God wasn't ignoring him. He was insulating him, shielding him from noise so his discernment could grow sharper, stripping away the scaffolding of man so his foundation could be divine. He was never off the path. He was just being rerouted inward. And in that moment, sitting in the fog of an empty city square, Darius realizes something. He may have lost the voice he could hear, but he hasn't lost the God who sees. Because chosen ones aren't just tested in the fire, they're trained in the quiet. The silent seasons are where warriors are built, where prophets are refined, where generals of light learn to hear God, not in the thunder, but in the stillness. And when Darius stands up again, the fog hasn't lifted, but his spirit has. He walks with nothing in his pockets, but something burning in his chest. A new kind of faith. The kind that doesn't need constant affirmation because it's anchored. Part 3. The Prophetic Number 757, Los Angeles, California. A crowded, scrolling world filled with noise and neon, yet one soul aches for divine clarity. The light of 1,000 lives flickers across her phone screen. Stories, reels, prayers turn to performance. Ariel scrolls not out of boredom, but out of longing. She's always been the spiritual one, felt things deeply, saw signs when others just saw traffic, but lately even the signs feel confusing. God, she whispers from the rooftop of her downtown apartment, are you still speaking, or have I been chasing shadows? She's been journaling numbers, 111, 444, and now this one keeps repeating 777, receipts, license plates, apartment doors. Everywhere she turns, it's there. But what does it mean? She closes her eyes, and for a second, the city noise fades. All she can hear is her heartbeat and the whisper that doesn't come from outside her. It's not a number, it's a declaration. Her eyes flutter open. She gets up, walks back inside, and opens YouTube. A recommended video appears on her feed. If you're a chosen one, comment 717 to declare you're ready for what heaven has planned. A chill travels down her arms. Her fingers tremble. Not because she's afraid, but because she knows. This isn't coincidence, this is confirmation. And so she types 777? I'm aligned. I say yes. The second her thumb hits post, something breaks in the unseen. It's not flashy, no fireworks, no angelic chorus, but her spirit feels it as if heaven has just nodded in agreement. Because in that moment, Ariel did more than comment. She signed a contract with the unseen. She agreed with her assignment. She came into alignment. 777 wasn't about angel numbers anymore. It was a divine yes. She wasn't manifesting the universe. She was responding to God. And the shift, it was already beginning. What had been tangled in confusion began to unravel. Clarity didn't shout, it whispered. Peace didn't arrive through explanation, but through release. That night she dreams. A golden door, a voice saying, you won't have to knock this time. The door is opening because you're ready. When she wakes, the city still roars, but her soul, silent, still, sure. She wasn't just a spiritual woman anymore. She was a sealed vessel, activated by surrender, marked by obedience, and awakened by a sacred number. Here, part 4. The shift is not emotional, it's spiritual. Atlanta, Georgia. A parked car just before sunrise, mist clinging to the windshield. The engine is off. The heater clicks gently in the silence. Jamal sits in his car, parked outside the community center where he volunteers. He should be going inside, but something has frozen him, not his body, but his spirit. His breath fogs the glass, not from cold, but from the weight in his chest. He once was a man full of vision. Trophies lined the shelf. Young men once called him Coach J. They said he saved their lives. But now, no one calls, no one sees. After his wife passed, the light in his eyes dimmed. Grief did something brutal, not just to his heart, but to his identity. He didn't stop loving God. He just stopped expecting Him. This morning, something feels different. Not loud, not obvious, but in the stillness, he can feel it. The air has weight, a pull in his spirit, like the atmosphere itself is pregnant with instruction. But it's not emotion. He's not crying. There's no worship music on. This isn't hype, it's holy. For a moment, Jamal places his hand on his chest, not to calm himself, but to check if he's still there. And that's when he hears it, not audibly, but undeniably. A whisper that bypasses ears and lands in the bones. This is not burnout, this is birthing. He leans forward. His mind wants to brush it off, but his spirit knows. This feeling isn't emotional, it's directional. Heaven isn't trying to excite him, heaven is trying to shift him. Because what Jamal doesn't yet realize is that when God is about to move a man into destiny, He doesn't stir the senses, He stirs the spirit. And Jamal's spirit is stirring. He reaches for the Bible on the passenger seat, opens to 1 Kings 19, not knowing why. And there it is. After the fire came a gentle whisper. That's it. That's what this moment is. Not fire, not earthquake, just whisper. And yet it's more real than anything he's felt in years. Because when the chosen ones are activated, they don't feel adrenaline, they feel alignment. Jamal doesn't leap out of the car. He doesn't shout. He simply straightens his back, adjusts his coat, walks inside with peace that no words can explain. Something is shifting, not around him, within him. This is not emotional energy, this is spiritual momentum. And once heaven starts moving inside you, nothing outside of you can stop it. The rejection that revealed royalty, Denver, Colorado, an empty sanctuary, early afternoon. The stained glass glows, but the pews are vacant. The church is quiet, not with reverence, but with the echo of absence. Maria sits alone in the back pew, clutching the last microphone she ever held. It's not plugged in. It hasn't been for over a year. They said they loved her voice, until it made them uncomfortable. until her anointing started exposing what was hidden behind their titles. One day she was leading worship with fire. The next, she was asked to step back and rest. No explanation, just exile dressed in Christian language. She didn't leave the church. The church left her. The betrayal cut deeper than any secular wound ever could, because she had given them her yes, her time, her talent, her tears, and in return, silence, rumors, rejection. She thought it was over. No stage, no ministry, no voice. But heaven had other plans. Because what Maria didn't know was that rejection isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's preservation. Sometimes God allows you to be dismissed by man so you can be revealed by Him. She opens her Bible aimlessly at first, and her eyes land on Luke 9:28. Jesus took Peter, John, and James and went up on a mountain to pray. He left the crowd on purpose. She reads it again. Only a few could witness His transfiguration. And suddenly, it makes sense. Not everyone was meant to go with you to the mountaintop. Maria wasn't being silenced, she was being set apart. Because royalty doesn't rise in crowded rooms. It's revealed in quiet places in the wilderness, in the exile, in the silent pews where no one claps, but heaven still listens. Her rejection wasn't the end. It was the reveal. The crown was always hers. But first, the crowd had to clear. She lets go of the microphone. Finally, not in bitterness, but in release, because she understands now her voice was never tied to a sound system. It was tied to an assignment. And that assignment just received a fresh activation. God didn't remove her from the spotlight to punish her. He did it to protect the weight she carries, the oil she was given, the healing she was born to sing over broken rooms. Maria stands, not to perform, but to be present. A crown is not always handed in ceremony. Sometimes it's placed in silence on the head of the one who stayed faithful, even when nobody was watching. In Part 5, The Rejection That Revealed Royalty, Denver, Colorado. An empty sanctuary early afternoon. The stained glass glows, but the pews are vacant. The church is quiet, not with reverence, but with the echo of absence. Maria sits alone in the back pew, clutching the last microphone she ever held. It's not plugged in. It hasn't been for over a year. They said they loved her voice, until it made them uncomfortable, until her anointing started exposing what was hidden behind their titles. One day she was leading worship with fire. The next she was asked to step back and rest. No explanation, just exile dressed in Christian language. She didn't leave the church. The church left her. The betrayal cut deeper than any secular wound ever could, because she had given them her yes, her time, her talent, her tears, and in return, silence, rumors, rejection. She thought it was over. No stage, no ministry, no voice. But heaven had other plans. Because what Maria didn't know was that rejection isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's preservation. Sometimes God allows you to be dismissed by man so you can be revealed by Him. She opens her Bible aimlessly at first, and her eyes land on Luke 9:28. Jesus took Peter, John, and James and went up on a mountain to pray. He left the crowd on purpose. She reads it again. Only a few could witness His transfiguration, and suddenly it makes sense. Not everyone was meant to go with you to the mountaintop. Maria wasn't being silenced, she was being set apart. Because royalty doesn't rise in crowded rooms. It's revealed in quiet places in the wilderness, in the exile, in the silent pews where no one claps, but heaven still listens. Her rejection wasn't the end. It was the reveal. The crown was always hers. But first, the crowd had to clear. She lets go of the microphone. Finally. Not in bitterness, but in release. Because she understands now her voice was never tied to a sound system. It was tied to an assignment. And that assignment just received a fresh activation. God didn't remove her from the spotlight to punish her. He did it to protect the weight she carries, the oil she was given, the healing she was born to sing over broken rooms. Maria stands, not to perform, but to be present. A crown is not always handed in ceremony. Sometimes it's placed in silence on the head of the one who stayed faithful, even when nobody was watching. Part 6. The Holy Clearing, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Early morning in a quiet backyard where frost clings to the edges of a garden that hasn't bloomed in years. There's something holy about empty space. Noah stands barefoot in the frozen grass, wrapped in an old hoodie and silence. He sips black coffee not because he likes the bitterness, but because it mirrors something honest inside him. This yard used to be filled with toys and laughter. Now it's still like it's waiting for something. So, is he? He's always been a builder of sermons, of sanctuaries, of systems. But after the divorce, the church scandal, and the public shame, he stopped building. He started clearing. First his house, then his contacts, then his theology. What others call deconstruction, Noah understood as a refinement. Because sometimes God doesn't start with a blueprint, he starts with a bulldozer. He looked around and saw his life covered in weeds, ideals that never belonged to relationships that weighed him down, guilt that masqueraded as holiness. And one morning just like this, he heard the whisper, "You cannot carry the new if your hands are still full of the old." So he began letting go, one room at a time, one mindset at a time, one version of himself at a time. And it hurt not because it was wrong, but because the old was familiar. He thought clearing meant losing, but now standing in this still garden, he realizes the absence has become altar. Noah closes his eyes and listens. It's not loud, not prophetic in a traditional sense, but something is shifting. The air is charged, like heaven is inhaling. This isn't chaos, this is clearing. This is God removing everything that can't come with you into the next dimension. And it's not punishment, it's protection, because the crown you're called to carry requires a posture that clutter cannot hold. Old friends stopped calling. He didn't chase them. Old ambitions lost their shine. He didn't mourn them. This was the season of subtraction. But subtraction in the kingdom always comes before multiplication. Jesus didn't multiply fish and bread until the crowd sat down. Stillness always precedes miracle. Noah breathes in, and in that breath he knows Friday is coming. Not just another Friday, the one marked in eternity, the one that doesn't just represent a new door, but a new dimension. He won't carry old wounds into new wine. He won't force old roles into new rhythms. He's not clearing out of grief. He's clearing out of readiness, because heaven doesn't pour fresh oil into vessels still full of yesterday's residue. And now he's ready. He's not empty. He's prepared. Part 7. The Assignment That Can't Be Earned. Chicago, Illinois, a modest therapy office with dim lighting, essential oils, and a soft ticking clock. A sacred space for unraveling. There's a difference between rest and collapse. Leah thought she was resting when she stepped down from the stage, but the truth, she was falling into exhaustion masked as sabbatical into silence that didn't heal, only buried. She had once preached to thousands, prophesied in fire, delivered words that made grown men tremble and altars overflow. But after the burnout, the backlash, the betrayal, her voice stopped reaching herself. Now she sits in a therapist's chair, not seeking deliverance, but trying to remember who she was before the lights and expectations. She used to think her assignment came from her effort. If she just fasted more, gave more, stayed strong longer, then maybe she could be trusted again. But somewhere in the quiet of this soft-lit room, with no audience, no microphone, no pulpit, she learns a truth that shakes her more than any conference stage ever did. You don't earn your assignment, you accept it. Tears come not loud but holy, because for the first time she understands her calling wasn't revoked, it was refined. She wasn't sidelined, she was secured. She opens her Bible hands, trembling, and lands in Judges 6, the story of Gideon, a man hiding, afraid, unqualified, and yet the angel of the Lord greeted him with words that didn't match his reality. The Lord is with you, mighty warrior. That's when it hits her. God doesn't speak to your situation, He speaks to your identity. Leah didn't need to feel ready, she just needed to agree. Her silence wasn't failure, it was strategy. Her pause wasn't weakness, it was preparation. She looks up at the ceiling and whispers with holy defiance, "Okay, God, I'll stop striving, I'll start walking." Because chosen ones don't earn favor, they carry covenant. And when heaven assigns you, no demon, no delay, no detour can disqualify what God has already declared. She stands to leave, not because her healing is finished, but because her assignment is reactivated. And she walks out not with fire in her feet, but with authority in her bones. This time she's not showing up to impress. She's showing up in agreement. Part 8. The flow finds you. New York City, a corner cafe in Brooklyn, late afternoon, golden light spilling through fingerprinted windows. Elijah stirs honey into his tea, watching it swirl like some slow galaxy. He came here to escape the noise. Not the street noise, the inner noise. Burnout has a smell, and to him it smells like peppermint tea, a worn messenger bag, and a calendar filled with good intentions that no longer stir joy. He's done all the right things, helped the poor, prayed for strangers, sacrificed dreams for ministry that never paid him back. But deep down, he's tired of trying, of always pushing the next stone uphill, of always initiating the next conversation with God, hoping this time he'll say something back. Across the cafe, a woman with headphones glances his way. They lock eyes for only a second. Then she smiles, kind, curious, and turns her laptop toward him. The screen reads, "You're not lost. You're aligned. Just wait." He freezes. She types something else. Turns the screen again. "I don't know why I'm doing this, but I felt God tell me." He needs confirmation. Elijah puts his tea down. He swallows something thick in his throat. He hasn't told anyone that just this morning in the shower he whispered, "God, if I'm still in alignment, please send a stranger to say it." And now, here he is. Brooklyn, sunlight, stranger, confirmation, not hype, not platform, just flow. Something clicks in his spirit. The gears of heaven begin to turn. He's not pushing anymore. He's being pulled. That's how you know you've entered alignment. The blessings don't knock you over, they find you because they were always assigned to you. He whispers a quiet thank you, not to the woman, but to the one who sent her. And for the first time in years, he doesn't feel the need to perform, to earn, to grind, to manifest, to beg. He just sits and lets it wash over him. The river is flowing again. Not because he turned the faucet, but because God turned the tide. Psalm 23 wasn't metaphor anymore. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me. Not because of effort, but because of alignment. Elijah doesn't ask the woman for her name. He doesn't need to. She delivered heaven's package, and that's enough. He leaves the cafe. Same clothes, same bag, same city, but everything feels lighter because the grind has ended and the flow has found him. Part 9. The circle tightens, the crown descends. San Diego, California, early evening at the shoreline. Golden waves lap at the sand as the sun begins its descent. One set of footsteps walking slow but steady. Grace walks barefoot where the water meets the earth. No music in her ears, no phone in her hand. Just salt air, sky fire, and the hum of the divine beneath the noise. She used to paint for hours, canvases filled with prophecy and promise. People called her gifted, churches hung her art, But the moment she started seeing things others didn't understand, they called it too much, too spiritual, too emotional. So little by little she dimmed, not because the light faded, but because it felt safer in shadows. Until now. Today something has shifted, not around her but within her. It started with a dream the night before. She was on a mountain alone, wearing a crown made of thorns and gold, and a voice whispered it had to tighten before it could rest. She didn't understand it then. But now, with her feet in the Pacific and the past falling off her shoulders like sand, it clicks. The circle had to tighten, for the crown to descend. Grace had mourned every loss. Friends who stopped calling, mentors who ghosted, doors that shut when she was finally ready. But they weren't losses, they were lifts, heaven's way of lightening her for elevation. Because where God is taking her, not everyone can go. Some were assigned for her wilderness. Fewer were chosen for her mountain. She bends down and picks up a small shell, broken but beautiful, and she speaks aloud, not for the ocean, but for her own soul. Let them go, the ones who couldn't celebrate her rising, the ones who needed her small, the ones who clapped for the wounded version but disappeared when she healed. Gone, released, cleared. The tide pulls against her feet like it's agreeing with her declaration, and that's when she feels it. Not a hand, not a sound, but a settling on her head. The crown, not imagined, not forced, not borrowed, hers, woven from every silent surrender, every moment she stayed kind while breaking every hour she worshipped when no one was watching. The crown fits now because the crowd is gone. And in its place, peace, presence, purpose. As the sun dips into the horizon, Grace walks back toward the path. The tide doesn't pull her back, because her time in hiding is over. Now she walks in royalty, not with noise, but with weight. Because when the circle tightens, the crown doesn't fall. It finds its rightful place. Part 10, The Divine Yes. Houston, Texas nightfall living room, dimly lit by one candle. The Bible lays open on the floor. One by one, all the voices from the previous parts begin to converge, not in person, but in spirit. It's quiet across the nation, but in the spirit realm, something is roaring. Rachel kneels by her son's bed, praying silently. Darius places his resume on a table he once used for Bible study. Ariel sets an alarm for 5:55 a.m., not out of discipline but expectation. Jamal pours coffee into a to-go cup and for the first time doesn't feel heavy when the cup is full. Maria opens her mouth to sing again, not on a stage but in her own living room. Noah deletes old contacts from his phone, smiling softly. Leah journals 3 words, "He still chose me." Elijah opens a document titled The Vision. Grace finishes her painting It's the Mountain from her dream. None of them speak to each other, but each of them hears the same sentence in their spirit. This is not a coincidence, this is the divine yes, because when God opens a vault, He doesn't do it with noise. He does it with alignment, with sacred timing, with quiet authority. Ephesians 3:20 begins to echo like a sacred bell. Now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more. This Friday, the day the Spirit whispered about, is not about hustle. It's about harvest. Not the kind you chase, but the kind that finds you. Not because you were perfect, but because you persisted. Each character stands in their moment, their spirit leaning forward, not in fear, but in faith. The vault is opening, the oil is flowing, the timeline is merging. This isn't a manifestation, this is activation. This is the prophecy that waited for maturity, the promise that needed your pain to become posture, the calling that had to be carried, not claimed. The waiting wasn't a delay, it was a countdown. And now heaven says yes, and earth must respond. This Friday, step into the destiny God prepared for you. There's a silence in the spirit right now, not the silence of absence, but the stillness of something sacred unfolding. If you've felt it in your chest, in your dreams, in the strange timing of everything lately, You're not crazy. You're not being emotional. You're being summoned, because this Friday is not just a moment on your calendar. It's the door heaven has been building in the background of your breakdowns. Every unanswered prayer stored, every not yet strategic, every heartbreak you barely survived heaven's way of breaking open what the world could never reach. And now that version of you, who used to second-guess everything, who needed constant confirmation, who thought they had to earn the promise, that version is gone. You are no longer becoming, you are. This is not just another motivational video. This is your mantle being handed to you, not in noise, in stillness, because God's chosen ones aren't launched with applause. They're released in alignment. Maybe you weren't rejected, you were redirected. Maybe you weren't being punished, you were being protected. Maybe the silence wasn't heaven turning away. It was God clearing the stage, so when you finally stepped out, it would be undeniable who sent you. Let me ask you something, soul to soul. Are you sure you're not one of the chosen just because you haven't seen a miracle yet? Because what if the miracle is already moving toward you and all you have to do is agree? This Friday, pause before you scroll. Stand still before you rush. Say yes before you feel ready, because God doesn't need your performance. He's waiting for your permission. If this word confirmed something deep in your spirit, don't let it pass you by. Write in the comments, I'm aligned, I'm ready, I say yes. Say it not to impress, but to seal the shift. Share this video with someone who's been waiting for a sign. You might be the confirmation they've been praying for. And if your spirit says this is just the beginning, then subscribe not to follow a channel, but to stay in alignment with what God is building, because the next story goes even deeper. And it just might carry your next breakthrough.